G'day and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I want to talk about something really interesting that I'm potentially finding clinically with my patients who have restless leg syndrome. What I want to go through in this video is I want to quickly talk about what I'm finding to be a potential link to restless leg syndrome that I don't think many people are talking about. And then as always, I want to talk about why that's potentially there, and then also give you something that you can do to hopefully see an immediate change in your symptoms, or at least explore whether this is specifically happening for you. So the first thing that we need to do before we get into this is we need to understand exactly where you feel your restless leg symptoms. And by doing so, we might be able to pick up on a pattern of where those symptoms might be being generated from or where they're coming from. So if you're someone who just has a general ache down through your leg, that's one thing. But if you find that you experience restless leg in a specific zone or a specific area of your body, that can cue us into thinking about certain specific levels of your spine. Because what we know is that the spine has the capacity to refer symptoms into your leg. But if you're dealing with specific areas of your leg as opposed to the broad aspect of your leg, then we might be able to zone into a specific part of your lower back that may not hurt, but may be dysfunctional in its own right to a level where it's expressing itself down to the areas that it connects with. And some of the main areas or the main concepts that we tend to see are obviously the nerves. So if you are someone who's ever had sciatica or any type of back-related leg pain, you'll know that if you have some dysfunction at the base of your lower back, you can get some pain into your calf, some pain down the back of your leg, based on where that nerve goes down through your leg and supplies. But the other thing that tends to get overlooked in terms of the connection between your back and your leg is what's called a dermatome distribution. And what these dermatomal patterns tend to be is they relate really heavily to how we develop as a fetus, where certain parts of our body originate from our spine in development. In terms of the skin and our sensation tends to be connected to various levels of our back. So if you can understand where your sort of restless leg symptoms may be, it may give you a cue as to where you might need to look for that dysfunction. So what I'd like you to try and do is you can choose a foam roller if you have one. You can also try and use a ball of some sort, whether it's a tennis ball or in this case a lacrosse ball. All you need is something that you can sort of use to gently press into your back to look for areas that feel stiff, tight or tender, and in an ideal world, potentially reproduce some of those restless leg symptoms into the areas that you feel it day to day. So the first thing that I'll use is with a foam roller. It's a little bit broader, gives a bit more of a broader understanding of what's going on here. But the areas that I want you to look for, essentially from sort of the bottom half of your back down, potentially anywhere down there is fair game. But we want to go hunting systematically and respectfully, looking for areas that feel stiff, tight or restricted, potentially tender, and spend some time in those areas and get them to free up. So what I like to do essentially is I like to start relatively sort of higher up, sort of at the top, just sort of the base of that rib cage or a little bit higher. And as we always do on the channel, I don't want you to roll around as the exercise. I just want you to gently move the roller up or down. But once you've found a spot, you want to stay on that spot and let that tissue accommodate to you being here. And I'm starting to feel that compared to my right side versus my left side, this side feels like it sinks in a bit easier. It's not met with as much resistance. It doesn't feel as hard. But when I roll across to the left-hand side a little bit more and hit the ribs on this side, but also the joints on this side, it feels like there's more going on here. So in a perfect world, I would put some pressure here and then I would feel something communicate with my leg. It doesn't always happen, but it would be fantastic if that were the case, just to prove to you and me that this is where your symptoms would be coming from clinically. But it's really important that you spend some time here, get that tissue to free up. You might spend a minute or two here. We're trying to get that sort of muscular tissue underneath here to reflexively relax, but we're also trying to encourage the joints underneath that may be stiff and restricted to give. And then once you've had enough of that, you can move the roller down a little bit further, spend some time on the spots that you feel are a little bit stiffer, tighter and more restricted than they should be. You can do this while you're watching TV, you can do this for as long or as short as you feel comfortable. But the point I wanted to make here is that you need to try and find and eliminate as much restriction and dysfunction as possible to get rid of those symptoms if they are connected in this way. So again, if you're using a ball of some sort, it's not really any different. It just gives you a little bit of a different access. So this time I'm going to go right down the base of my spine. So I'm just not on the bump in the middle. I'm just off to the side here. And again, comparing right to left, this side, the ball sinks in a lot easier. This side feels a lot more restricted than the other side did. And if I was getting some symptoms into my leg from this area, that's a dead giveaway that there's potentially something here that I need to work on. Once I've had enough of that, then I can move the ball up a fraction, go hunting around for some of that dysfunction that might be connected to that. But the point is, you want to be thorough enough that A, you can figure out which side, and it's generally one side that goes up, it doesn't sort of flip-flop across. Then hopefully when you would expect to get your restless leg symptoms, if you've made a difference on that end of the scale, you may not necessarily feel the same level of symptoms, hopefully straight away, or at least within a reasonable amount of time. So this is one of those things where I can't point you to a piece of research that says, if you have restless leg syndrome, that your back is the cause of that dysfunction. But what I can say is the patients that I see that comment on having restless leg syndrome all seem to have a very specific section of their back that is stiffer and tighter, most likely on the same side, that feels restricted, it feels dysfunctional. And when I release that and they feel like that has improved, that their restless leg symptoms tend to improve over time as well. So this is one of those moments again where I don't want you to take my word for this, but it's a really simple thing that you can try at home. It's very specific. You don't need someone professional doing it for you. You can explore this for yourself, work really hard on trying to find those restricted areas and get rid of them, and then see what happens to your symptoms that day, that night, or the next day. And then you can learn exactly what effect that may be having, if any at all. So if you are finding that there is a specific section or sections of your back that is directly tying into your restless leg symptoms, then we need to ask the question of why that specific part of your back has become dysfunctional in the first place. And again, if you're a fan of the channel, you'll know that one of the things that I find clinically is that the main reason why a specific part of your back or a specific part of your spine becomes dysfunctional and then can express itself into a bunch of different symptoms that you may not even realize coexist is it often comes back to the positions and the shapes that you put your back into. So remember, we can't clinically say with confidence that bad posture or bad positions directly lead to pain, because there's such a rich amount of sort of factors that go into someone eventually becoming sore. But hindsight is generally relatively clear. Although I don't want to promote that this section of your back is causing pain, what we do know is that a specific section of your back can become dysfunctional if you put it into a bad position for long enough, and that may have the potential to turn into something pain or injury related down the track. Although it's never guaranteed, again, hindsight can be relatively clear on that front potentially. So the point I want to make here is that if you know that when you grab the ball, that you put the ball into an exact part of your back that feels dysfunctional, you didn't know it was dysfunctional, and you're confident that it's having an influence on your restless leg symptoms, then the reason why that section of your back has become stiff, tight, and dysfunctional in the first place may come back to the shape that you're putting that back into. If you find that you sit on a couch, if you sit at a desk all day, if you're standing, bending over a lot, it doesn't matter what you're doing, you may find that there's a theme throughout your day-to-day life where instead of being nice and straight and loading up your trunk as a whole, you might find that you're individualizing certain segments, creating a hinge into that part of your back, and then staying there over time to unknowingly ask that tissue to become stiff, tight, and potentially dysfunctional as well. What we also see is if you find that one side is particularly more dysfunctional than the other, there may be some asymmetry involved in the shapes that you get into. So again, a classic one is someone who sort of sits into the couch, but maybe sits on into sort of one arm of the couch if the TV is off to one side. If you're someone who likes to sit with your sort of feet underneath you. Another one is if you are someone who sits at a desk all day, and you might find that you're a bit twisted because you're reaching out with that mouse and you create this sort of rotation through your trunk that again biases one side of your spine more than the other once you've kicked a hinge into that spine. So if you're someone who's been dealing with restless leg syndrome for a long time and you're finding it hard to conquer, please take a look at your lower back. Take a look at the individual segments of your lower back for any muscular tightness or joint dysfunction in the area. And if you find that there is genuinely a connection that you feel between the two, then it's crucially important that you also take a step back and analyze the positions and the shapes that you're putting that part of your back into day to day to try and fully understand the entire process going on here. Because if you spend your time trying to free up those sections of your spine, but you don't then try and put those sections into a better position day to day, it's unrealistic to expect that those things will go away forever. So I genuinely hope that was helpful for you. I know how frustrating and uncomfortable and draining restless leg syndrome can be. So please let me know in the comments down below if you're able to find a connected section of your back that maybe started to influence your symptoms in a way that you didn't think or may never have thought of before, please consider leaving a like rating on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new. And if you absolutely did find that this video may have helped you in a way that you may not have been helped before, please consider leaving a super thanks donation on the video. It's just a really great way to help support me and the channel, allow me to make these videos and make them better. But again, ultimately, I hope that was helpful for you, and I hope to see you in the next one.